period of urbanization, that is from the 6th century BC to 4th century BCE, there were so many economic and political changes that it could not leave the social fabric out of it without any corresponding changes. So we find that side by side with the economic and political changes that were effected in this period, we also find the rigid Vedic society would also undergo and would not remain the same when it reached the Middle Ganga region. For this period, we are indebted to definitely the Vedas. They don't totally go out of use. The later Vedic text is very important. We find another new kind of literature that comes up, that is the Sutra literature, the 6 kind of Sutra literature. For instance, the Grija Sutra, the Kalpa Sutra, the Sulva Sutra, the Grija Sutra. So these are the various sutras which are very relevant for our purpose. And of course, the entire period is dominated by the various kinds of Buddhist texts that we have, and also some of the Jain sources. But the main area would be the main source material for us would be the some of the Vedic texts and these Dharma Shastras and the Dharma Sutras, and also the Buddhist so different Buddhist sutras, the different Buddhist Nikayas, the different Buddhist, both Mahayana and later on the Hinayana texts, that would be of great use for us.
This Janapadas and Mahajanapadas and the emergence of urbanism in 6th century BC, the society becomes very complex, and this complexity of the society is further nurtured by the fourfold Varna system which we experience in Brahmanical literature. So during this period, we have that for the first time a kind of literature which was known as the Dharma Sutras, and it codified the social, economic and political norms of a society. So we have a set of codified rules which a social being had to follow. And in this codification, we find that Brahmanas were given a very high position. We have the fourfold Varna system where the Brahmanas are the chief, and then with the championing of the cause of the Brahmanas, we have much more reference to the rituals, and these rituals were related to the Vedic practices. So the Dharma Sutra literature gives us a wide range of rituals, gives us a wide range of activities which a social being had to perform. Now, what we find in these Dharma Sutras is that they talk of a kind of admixture of Varnas. When we talk of Varnas, we know that there are 4 types of Varnas: Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra.
In all religious functions, the Brahman dominated, be it the life of a king, be it the life of a common man. There was also a tussle between the 2 highest castes regarding their own superiority. You know, the Brahmans, because they dominated the cultural, the religious life, and they were the mediators between the God and men. They were the mediators of, they were the performers of all these sacrifices, and because the 10 sanskaras which a person had to follow, a normal householder or every member of society had to follow, starting from the time of conception till the death, these were also dominated by the Brahmans. So sanskaras were dominated by the Brahmans. The religious ceremonies which involved the kings, like the performance of the Rajasuya or the Ashwamedha or the Vajapaya, also needed the mediation of the Brahman. He was the sole interpreter of the Vedas, and we know that since the oral tradition was very strong, the entire Veda was memorized only by the Brahmans. So they were the upholder of all religious beliefs and practices, and as a result of this we find that the newly acquired strength of the Kshatriyas, that the Kshatriya dominated even the activities of the Brahmins, we find that there was a natural claim as to which was the more powerful and more higher of these two castes, and there was every attempt to stop the contamination of the castes so that there was going to be the caste purity could be maintained, and that was very understandable, because one way the Aryans or the ruling community could maintain their supremacy in these newly colonized regions, in these areas of the new settlement, was to maintain their identity, and that identity could be maintained by maintaining the purity of their origin. But no matter what were the various steps that were taken, we find that mixed marriages took place.
A marriage between a Brahmana man and a Kshatriya female, or a Kshatriya man and a Brahmana female, so you have a different kind of admixture, and so the offspring of this union is neither a Kshatriya or a Brahmana. So this gives rise to Jati. So we have from this period itself the concept of Varna Shankara, and so we have the different kinds of Jatis. So the number of Varnas were static. We had always the 4 Varnas, but we had innumerable Jatis in the right from the time of the Dharma Sutras. The Dharma Sutras, when they talk about this formation of Jatis, they have references to 2 kinds of marriages. They talk of Anuloma type of marriage and Pratiloma type of marriage. In the Anuloma type of marriage, this is which is accepted by the Shutrakaras. The male is from a higher Varna and the female is from a lower Varna. But whereas in the Pratiloma type, the female is from the higher Varna and the male is from the lower Varna, which is not accepted in a society. But since it is very understandable that you have a kind of society where you cannot stop the admixture of different Varnas, and therefore the Shutrakaras had this positively given codes of conduct or codes of law where you have the Varna Shankara ideal of intermarriages and of the formation of the Jatis.
Out of all these Jatis, we find there were some which were totally held outside the pale of the Varna Jati ridden society. They were called the Chandalas. The Chandalas were considered to be offsprings of the worst forms of marriages that could take place. That was the marriage between a Brahmana mother and a Shudra father. And we also find that even Gautama Buddha, he was not in favor of supporting the Chandalas, because Buddha is believed to have said that he would not preach in a village which had a Chandala or a corpse.
Now again the Shutra literatures give us a detailed account of the types of or the kinds of marriages that were being performed at that point of time. So they talk about 8 different kinds of marriages. Those are Brahma, then we have a kind of marriage like Ashura, Poishacha, Rakshasa, the Gandharva. These Gandharva, Ashura, Paishacha and Rakshasa, these 4 forms of marriages were not accepted or not looked at with support by the Sutrakaras, because here it was, in case of Gandharva, it was the choice of the persons getting married, and in case of other types like the Asura, Rakshasa and Paishacha, it was not done in a way the Sutrakaras would like to do, like it was not a Shavarna marriage. But in case where you have Prajapatya, Asha, Deva, in this case of this type of marriages, you have the father of the daughter who is actually organizing the marriage, and we have a very strong patriarchal hold, and the marriages are within Savarna, and these kinds of marriages are being sanctioned by the Kshatriyas.
We find that Buddha was also a protagonist of the equality in marriage, because perhaps he did not want to upset the social order as it had existed, and he also made distinctions between the high professions and the low professions, the hina professions. Some of the professions were considered to be higher and some of the professions were considered to be lower.
Instead of the Varnas, Buddha talks about Kulas. Kula means lineage, groups, clans, family. And here we have two kind of structures. One was the Ukkatta Kula and the other was the Hina Kula. And this Kula structure, the Ukkatta means the Utkrishta. In Pali it is Ukkatta, and the Hina Kula, these were actually based on the work of a person. This was the crafts, the sippa. We find reference to the term sippa, which talks about the different kinds of work that a person is doing. So you have in the Buddhist literature people who are performing some kind of work which are not very not taken to be a very good work. For example, a lot of manual labor is involved in this kind of works. Then the Buddhist text talks it about as a hina sippa. Whereas Utkrishta sippa means cattle rearing, Utkishta sippa means cultivating, trader, then kayasthas, that is writing work of accountant, scribes. These all formed under the big bracket of Utkrishta Kula, that is the Ukkatta Kula. Whereas the work of a washerman, the work of a scavenger, all these things were under the garb of were taken to be a hina sippa. The Sudras also give us different kinds of sanskara, talks about different kinds of sanskaras, that is sacraments, and they are 10 in number, which is called the Dasha Sanskara. This means it talks about a sanskara which starts from the conception to the funeral rites, and there are a series of rituals which had to be performed during these different stages of life. So this was a well accepted phenomenon and referred to as Dasha Sanskara, where you have the common rituals like the Upanayana, marriage, Shraddha, Annaprasana. All these form a part of the Dasha Sanskara.
The Grahapati was a very high agricultural magnate who performed agricultural activities, who was the owner of agricultural lands, and he managed the agricultural products, the distribution.
And what is interesting is that this Grahapati, which can be translated into the Sanskrit Grihapati, which means a householder, was actually much beyond that. A Grahapati was a person who had accumulated enough wealth from agriculture, and the resources that he have accumulated from agriculture, he now uses those resources for other purposes, and he is a very important member of the society because we find that he is taken to be one of the 7 jewels of a Chakravarti Raja. So a Chakravarti Raja would have a Grahapati in his court. We have another category of person known as the Sethi Grahapati. Now Sethi Grahapati or Grahapati Sethi is different from a Sethi or a Gahapati, because a Sethi Gahapati is a person where we find a Gahapati when he accumulates a lot of wealth from his agricultural surpluses, and then he is using this wealth for non-agricultural purpose or for trade. So he is set in a rural milieu as well as set in an urban milieu. So Sethi Gahapati as a class was different and was very much in demand in the Buddhist texts. A Sethi or a Shreshthi was very close to the rulers. We have seen that in different times, we have referenced several stories in the Jatakas where they talk of the closeness between the Buddha and the Sethi, or the closeness between the Sethi and the Raja. The Buddhist texts give us a lot of examples where we find that Anathapindaka, very rich Sethi, he is also referred to as a Gahapati as well. Then we have Jivaka, the famous physician, being referred to as a Gahapati, and all these people are included in the term Gahapati Vagga, which means they are part of the Gahapati milieu.
The Grahapati managed the agriculture and the Sethi managed the industrial part of industrial activities of society. So as a result of this, they were also considered the elites of society, and so we find that some were ritually important, like the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas, because the Brahman managed the performance of different kinds of rituals and the worships, and the Kshatriya managed the acquisition of territories and the maintenance of these territories, the administration of the territories, and ritually not so high Gahapatis and the Sethis were actually very powerful so far as their status was concerned. So we find that the ritual status, there was now sort of the two kinds of parallel status which were operating in society, the ritual status and the actual status. The Brahman and the Kshatriyas were ritually of very high status, but the Gahapatis and the Sethis, who performed very important functions of society, they were also part of the elite because of their actual status.
In the Anguttara Nikaya, we have reference to different structures of the society, and where it is said that a Brahmana thinks about only his mantra and yagga, so his world is his Brahma Loka. A king, a political person, will talk of or think of his realm and the power, so his world his Kshatriya will be his territorial world. And for a Gahapati who will think about the agricultural milieu, about his work, so his world relates to the fruit that he gets from his work.
There was a multitude of professions came up, and there was stratification, and we find the jati concept played a very important role in the selection of these professions. A particular jati or definite jatis were assigned different kinds of economic activities, different kinds of economic functions, different kinds of social functions in society. So the Varna and the Jati, the ritual status, the actual status, all this came to make the age between the 6th century BC and the 4th century BC a very complicated social status, and we need not consider that the induction of heterodox sects like Buddhism and Jainism, especially Buddhism, made much difference in the caste as it existed. Buddha no doubt opened the door to all castes for induction in his order, but so far as the society, everyday society, every ordinary man's society was concerned, the status and his preferences remained the same. When it came to the question of the status of a woman, Buddha was not very happy, he was not very open to the induction of women in his order, and to his disciple Ananda he had also expressed his disfavor, but women were still inducted into the society, into the Buddhist order. And even when Buddha blessed a woman, he would say that I hope that you will be born as a man in your next birth, definitely making a distinctive kind of existence for the man and woman in society. But what Buddhism did was this: in this society which was ridden by conflict, chaos, fightings, great loss of bloodshed, and different kinds of social rivalry and animosity which prevailed in society, he wanted to bring some sort of an equilibrium by professing peace, that all the communities should live in harmony, and that all provided and all performed the duties that were indispensable for the social machinery to function. But definitely in this period we find that even in the Buddhist order, in the written history of Buddhism, we find some women playing very important role. Maybe some of them started as a courtesan like Amrapali, but they could enter the order, they could become important theories or important nuns of the order. They did not experience the kind of aspersion that was cast upon them prior to their induction into the Buddhist order, but we must say that these were exceptions. In the society at large, we find the ban on the widow remarriage, the popularity of marriage of the girl child, these all prevailed, or we can say sort of sanctified in this period, and there was a progressive degeneration so far as the status of women were concerned from that time, although there was some semblance of some sort of authority which these nuns performed within the Buddhist order, although they were always considered subservient to the male monks who dominated the order, who controlled the order.
One talks about a social structure which is very much steeped in the Varna ideology, where you have the Varna Shankara and the concept of Varna and Jati. So it is more into the fourfold Varna system along with the Jatis, and we have another worldview which is being offered by the Buddhist test, an alternative to the Varna, but where again you have differentiation, but that differentiation is marked not by the Varna differences but by your work. So two different worldview dominates the society or social structure of 6th century BCE.